Okay, the recording has started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We're going to take just a minute or two here for people to log in and get settled. Welcome to the American Marketing Association New Orleans chapter. You are in the right place, and so glad that you've taken the time today to be with us. I'm just talking slowly so everyone can kind of enter the room and grab their lunch or their drink, turn off the email. It's such a beautiful day outside. If anyone has the opportunity, you could take your computer and sit outside compared to last week when it was so cold. All right. I'm going to assume, Mike, are we looking pretty good in terms of people in the room? It's hard to know without seeing faces. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're at 12:03, and I've got a few minutes of introduction before I hand things off to this incredibly smart panel that we have gathered here today for all of you. So first and foremost, thank you for making the time today to be with the AMA NOLA chapter. We are really excited about today's session. My name is Mariska Morse. I am the president of the American Marketing Association New Orleans chapter, and I have an amazing team that works really hard with me, with us, to deliver some really fantastic programs for the New Orleans community. Just by way of kind of introduction, my history is in the space of women's leadership. I helped run a nonprofit for about 20 years called the Forte Foundation, and ran all of the marketing for Forte for those 20 years, including some account management duties as well. Currently pursuing a master's degree at Tulane University, and so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to serve in this role with AMA NOLA. But it's not just me. I have this amazing team with me, the board of AMA NOLA, and we got together actually back in August and put together a strategic plan and really thought about how do we want to make a difference over the course of the year. And the kind of program you're going to see today is one of the ways that we wanted to make a difference. We wanted to be sure that we were showcasing sort of the incredible talent across the New Orleans community. We have amazing professionals in this city. And so number one, we wanted to be sure that we were bringing that talent to the AMA community. We also want to really be a go-to marketing resource for New Orleans. So whether you're a business owner or with a nonprofit, you're a student or a rising professional, we want to be available to you in the area of marketing and communications. Another goal of ours is to really grow the diversity of our membership. We want to be sure that everyone feels a part of AMA NOLA. So we encourage you to really reach out to your friends, and whether it's passing along information or bringing some, next time you could do a lunch and learn and bring a friend and watch the webinar. Hopefully we'll have some live sessions soon too. If you are new to us today, we have had some really cool sessions in the past. If you're a member, you can download those sessions. Like last month, we had a workshop with influencers and how to integrate influencers into your marketing program. Every month we have a marketing meetup where you can meet up with professionals like yourselves. It's always mid-month. The next one we have is March 17th is our next monthly marketing meetup. So I just wanted to kind of introduce who we are in terms of a board, AMA NOLA. We put on lots of events and programs every month, and we hope you'll continue to join us. Last thing I want to say is we just launched a jobs board. So if you're on the AMA NOLA website, be sure to check out the jobs board. And most importantly, just like we're doing today, AMA NOLA is about connecting. It's about meeting other like-minded professionals across the city, meeting people that you wouldn't have met otherwise. And with that, I want to sort of start shifting into our panel for today. I'm not tracking very well with the slides, but that's okay. You can listen to me and look at the slides. In terms of, actually, if you want to go back one really quick, Anna, I probably should have just done the slides myself. I'm a free-flowing speaker. Just to close up on AMA, if you're not a member, I highly encourage it. It's only $149. I'll make my little sales pitch. It's $149 for the entire year. You get access not only to what we're doing here locally, but the national organization has tons of resources, magazines, webinars, trainings. It's quite an inexpensive investment for a lot of professional return. So definitely think about that. Okay, so I've talked about AMA NOLA and about the importance of being a member and connecting with each other. Let me move on to why DEI. It is so important to us as a board, as a community, as AMA National. They actually have a DEI task force. We wanted to be really intentional about talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In my sort of 25 years as a marketer, it's always been something that we think about, right? Making sure that we are reaching out to a diverse audience, that we have diverse photos, that we are speaking in an inclusive way. But it's not easy in terms of having that lens from the top of the organization to the bottom of the organization, from the right to the left. And that's what we're going to be really focusing on today. And I'm so excited to hand over things to Cleveland Spears, who's going to be our moderator, to really lead this discussion. And the panelists represent a cross-section of expertise, from a research group to a major employer in the city, to a magazine, we have just a lot of different areas of expertise, including as well as expert with strategic partnerships and campaign development around equity. So these are experts from sort of across the field, and I'm really looking forward to you hearing from them. Cleveland is going to be our moderator. And again, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are bringing it to you today because it's critical that it's a mindset, it's intentional, and it's a commitment from across the organization, not just kind of what you're doing from a marketing perspective. So with that said, I just wanted to give you a sense of why this was important to us. Cleveland is going to get us started. If you haven't met Cleveland, he has over 500 connections on his LinkedIn. So I'm guessing he probably knows most of you on this webinar today. He's the president and CEO of Spears Group. And he's a native New Orleanian. He's an alumna of the University of New Orleans, over 15 years of professional experience in marketing, advertising, public relations, and event production. Spears Group is a full service marketing, PR, and experiential marketing firm. Their clients include Entergy, Ochsner, Health Systems, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Xavier. And I read at the, as well that the NBA tapped the Spears Group for some PR in 2014 and 2017, which must have been really fun. That we could sort of go on about, but I want to hand things over to him right now to take the lead.
Great. Thank you so much for that great introduction, Mariska. And thank you to the AMA New Orleans board for inviting me to be here to lead this important discussion. Today, we'll be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what it means to build an inclusive brand. And the AMA board has done a fabulous job at creating and curating just an amazing panel of thought leaders on this topic. And I have the great pleasure of introducing all of them. I'll start with my dear friend, Kelly Solony. Today, Kelly leads Camelback Ventures, strategic partnerships and fundraising activities with the focus on creating an equitable ecosystem of entrepreneurs, of women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color. Prior to joining Camelback, Kelly served as the director of operations for Carol's Daughter in New York, She was critical part in helping scale that company and really leading to the acquisition of that company by L'Oreal USA. Kelly also serves as the campaign manager for the Campaign for Equity and their efforts to make New Orleans one of the most equitable cities in New Orleans. I'm sorry, one of the most equitable cities in the country. So we look forward to hearing from Kelly. Next on the panel, we have Anne Maria Beck. Anne Maria is the producer and publisher of Viva NOLA magazine. Viva NOLA is a bilingual, multi-platform publication that seeks to connect cultures and give voice to the Hispanic community in the greater New Orleans area. Anna Maria has worked in media and broadcast television for years. She's worked with entities such as PR Newswire, 20th Century Fox, Premier TV, MSNBC, CNN, PBS, and a host of others. And we look forward to hearing from her and sharing her perspective from the media and publisher lens to today's discussion. Next is Hillary Davis. Hillary is the director of diversity and inclusion at Ochsner Health Systems. She joined Ochsner in November of 2020. Hillary holds a BS in political science from Fisk University and a master's in public administration from Southern University in Baton Rouge. Next we have Sandra Brown. Sandra is the president and founder of MDRG. Sandra founded MDRG over 26 years ago and has created a market research firm that prides itself on designing research that studies the whole mind. Sandra is a graduate of Gordon College in Massachusetts, where she graduated summa cum laude, as well as a graduate of the University of New Orleans, where she graduated magna cum laude with a master's degree in sociology. She's also completed advanced moderator training with REVA, which is the Qualitative Research, and she's also certified by QRCA, the Qualitative Research Consultants Association, as a moderator and qualitative research consultant. As I said at the outset, the AMA board has really put together just a dynamic panel of thought leaders representing a vast cross-section of marketing, advertising, diversity, policy, publishing, as well as research. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up with the question, and this question is going to be for each of you. And this question is, what is diversity and inclusion? What does it look like in practice, and what does it mean to you? And Hillary, we'll start with you on this question, followed by Kelly, Sandra, and Anna Maria.
Sure, and thank you so much, Cleveland and AMA, for this incredible opportunity. I'm certainly glad to be here and glad to sit amongst literally giants in this field and in this work. So thank you all so much. As Cleveland said, I am Hillary Davis. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the South Shore region here at Ochsner. And South Shore here at Ochsner means all of our community. I support diversity initiatives for all of our community hospitals. So that is Baptist Hospital, St. Bernard, West Bank, and of course, every facility in our river region. So really diversity from a healthcare lens is more so about ensuring that you have enough difference within the organization so that way you're set up to really dismantle those health disparities, as well as have a diverse workforce and a more inclusive environment that will really help you to better serve your patients. Certainly as a healthcare system, that is at the very top of mind. And so inclusivity is really about valuing the people that you have and really showing that and demonstrating that by your policies. I would say by cultural observances, making sure they feel seen. And of course, finally, being a good corporate citizen in the communities that you're located in that you serve.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Hillary. Kelly, Salmi, what does diversity and inclusion look like in practice, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, and again, thank you, AMA and Cleveland, for the warm introduction. I'm definitely honored to be here. So as Cleveland mentioned, I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Camelback Ventures. We are a national accelerator based here in New Orleans, but we're a national accelerator for entrepreneurs of color and women. So diversity for us is a little bit more pointed, but I'll just start by saying, to me, what diversity means is really about the presence of different identities relative to other, while inclusion is more, I would say inclusion is more of the environments you create with a lot of intentionality for that diversity to feel welcome and valued. So that when I think of inclusion, I think of more of the core competencies of empowerment. But I also want to just say, because we're talking about DEI, I don't want to touch on the E, which is equity, which is more so the space I play in more than any of them, which is equity, meaning the insurance that everyone has access to the same opportunity and way of being. So having said that, for me, equity is more about, first and foremost, the acknowledgement that we're all, even in diverse backgrounds, starting from different and oftentimes unequal starting points. And the reason why I just wanted to start with that framing is just because it matters a lot in my work, particularly at Camelback Ventures, who deals 90+% with entrepreneurs of color. And it really, we deal every day with the behind the mark, if you will, starting point that entrepreneurs have in terms of access, certainly not in terms of brilliance, but in terms of access to what we like to say our 3 core competencies, which is coaching, capital, and connections. So for us, our practice is really about advocating and opening pipelines to those 3 C's to create a more equitable entrepreneurial ecosystem for all.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Kelly. Well said. Sandra, same question, kind of, what does it mean to you and what does it look like in practice?
Or, I mean, I could have parroted what Kelly said, so I'm not going to do that in the interest of expediency, but let me just start with a quick introduction to myself. As I said, as Cleveland said, I'm the president and founder of a market research firm. So what we do, and certainly in the last year or so, is really help our clients and help brands figure out what does that look like for them and how do they respond from a marketing perspective. I will say that from a diversity perspective, and I'm just going to lump it into diversity, inclusion, and equity, because again, I don't want to parrot what Kelly said, but it's really for us, it's deep diving into understanding, acknowledging, and embracing all experiences and all people, and making sure that anything that we do within our own firm, but really in support of brands, is acknowledging that and honoring those different experiences. And so we, support. For instance, we support Oxnard Health System in those efforts, and Hancock Whitney on a local basis, but really figuring out, how do we create a marketing plan or even an internal culture that reflects the population in whole, but also really honors those experiences. For us in market research, it's also sort of created a reckoning with the way that we collect data. There's been a lot of hand-wringing about the way that we've collected data over the years, and we're talking about the fact that it's really important that we don't whitewash, the data when we're looking at Gen Pop, but we're making sure that we're collecting all of the different voices and honoring those voices.
Thank you. And Anna Maria.
Thanks. Hi. Yes, happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm enjoying the company of these brilliant people. Diversity to me in the workplace is more of a metric that measures and shows the makeup of your organization compared to the region where you operate. So it's great when you have a diverse workforce, but if the workforce is not included, going into the inclusion part of it, if you don't value those differences or the skills, abilities, experiences, and different points of views, then you are failing to really do something positive with that diversity. Personally, for me, diversity and inclusion has been kind of like a life quest, because when I moved to the US, I was 17 years old and I had to figure out where I belonged. So personally, that's kind of like how I have been involved with the diversity space, but also in understanding there are others like me who are looking of ways to belonging not only to society, but to their own companies. I realized that we needed to provide something, and that's how the company was created. Viva Nola Magazine was an avenue to connect communities and to bring a diverse audience to organizations that were not connected to the audience. So very much a reality for me and just a quest that I'm still figuring out.
Great. Thank you, Ana Maria. So I think you can all can tell by their opening comments that this is going to be a really exciting conversation, and we have some great folks with us today. One note that I'll make is that we're using the Q&A function at the bottom of your bar. So if anyone has any questions for this dynamic panel, we'll allocate time at the end. And so please drop them in there. And what we've done is we have a couple questions.
I just wanted to interrupt really quick because I had oversight in not introducing the two board members on the call. So Anna Ladon, who's our programming chair, and Haley Pegg, who's our executive director with the board. They're going to be helping manage the Q&A. So I just wanted to be sure that everyone knew who they were. So Anna and Haley, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Haley and Ann. And obviously you all did a tremendous amount of work getting us prepared for today. So definitely want to make sure we acknowledge you all. As we get into questions for our panelists, I want to direct the first question to Kelly Salney. And Kelly, the question is, as you see it from your seat and your expertise, what are the long-term consequences of and we being the city of New Orleans, the region, and really the marketing and advertising industry as a whole, if we ignore diversity and inclusion and don't make kind of meaningful steps to make progress in those areas, diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I think, at the Campaign for Equity of New Orleans, but even in my work with Camelback, there's tons of data, both qualitative and quantitative, that will tell you that of all the inequities, of all the triggers, racism in particular is the one that has the biggest impact. So for us, or race, I should say racial inequities has the biggest impact. So for us and me personally, I should say, I don't really I feel like racism and other inequities is actually holding us back from being a premier city, from really seeing New Orleans really reach its full potential. And I'm born and raised here. I love New Orleans. I think New Orleans is great. But in terms of moving forward and how we move forward and especially how we recover from COVID-19, we have to be extremely cognizant of not implementing race-neutral policies and practices to race-based problems. So I think it's deeply important that we approach all work with a DEI lens in particular, because, excuse me, because again, there's a business case as to how we move forward as a city in terms of recovery and how we just continue to sustain and thrive.
Thank you for that, Kelly. I want to come to Sandra next. Sandra, you are a thought leader in the area of market research. MDRG is certainly a leader in market research in this region. In previous discussions, you mentioned that you and your team have some research and some data on this topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really what consumers are looking for, expecting from brands as it relates to topics of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Can you share some of you all's findings on that? And I think there may also be some slides that some visual aids to your points. So we can cue those up for Sandra, and Sandra, we'll let you share with the group on that.
Sure. And while we're pulling those up, let me just tell you a bit about the backstory. Last year, as we entered into the pandemic and then continued on through the summer starting with the killing of George Floyd, and there was this, national reconciling with just our history of racism in the country. We had brands that were coming to us saying, what can we do to show support? How should we respond as a brand? What responses will move this movement forward? And then really, because they are branding, what will the impact be on the brand? And I'm going to take you through a couple of slides. This is a much longer webinar, in deck, which I'm happy to share at another time with anyone on the call. But the first thing, and it's before we even get to this slide, there was very strong support for the Black Lives Matter movement, and we were specific to say it's a movement in our questioning. Certainly, you'd see the different age and racial demographics, as you would expect, more support among Black Americans and younger Americans, but there was very strong support. And then this slide really spoke to this notion of this optimism. Is there going to be lasting societal change as a result of this movement? And again, this kind of fell along the lines of how you would expect, but there was a certain amount of optimism that I think we have an opportunity to kind of capitalize on. The next slide really speaks to this, the kind of the setup that I had though, which is that the vast majority of people in our survey really felt that brands had a role in responding to these issues. I mean, specifically around police violence, but that was just the tipping point for, these broader conversations that we are having and we need to continue to have in a very meaningful way. Going to the next slide, some other data that really spoke to the importance, and again, I'm talking to marketers here as to why this is something that we need to address as brands and as marketers. 20% of people in our national survey said they would stop buying from a brand that they perceived to behave hypocritically on these issues of racial injustice. And 6%, which I wish it was more, would stop buying from a brand that remains silent. But what we see on the next slide is that when you start talking about younger consumers, this Gen Z in particular, and I think anybody that's studying Gen Z and millennials understands this, almost 70%, 7 out of 10 of Gen Z are more likely to buy from a company that contributes to social causes. So really what these slides are about is really speaking to the importance of responding. So another question on the next slide, which was then, what are you doing? Like, what are the things that you should be doing as a brand? And again, we deep dive into this more in the full deck, but looking at some of those expectations, if you will, for how brands should be responding. It's a lot of the same things that we're talking about: ensuring diversity in hiring practices, holding racial sensitivity training. Again, I don't want to go through all of these, but really it's talking about very specific actions. And the reason why that was important is because what we continue to hear in this study is that don't tell me what you're going to do or what you're doing, show me what you're doing, and then demonstrate that and demonstrate the effectiveness of it. I don't want to just hear nice platitudes. And then the last the last slide really from a data standpoint is that, and I thought that this was really telling, is that 41% of Black Americans said they feel that brands don't understand their experience, which, really speaks to kind of where I started with, is we have been putting nice pictures of, Black or Hispanic people or people of color in our ads, but not really making them authentic. And so I think that, there is a requirement among brands, and that's kind of what our data showed. There's more data in terms of what are the specific actions that you need to be taking, but I think all of this really points to the importance, Cleveland, of why this is something that we need to be addressing as brands.
Thank you so much for sharing that kind of data-driven perspective. And as I just took a few handwritten notes, is that consumers want brands to speak up and be kind of active in things like racial and social justice, live their values. Don't just say it or make a post about it on social media, but show it through other ways that the brand is coming to life. Because as a marketer, we know that clients tell us or advertisers tell us, how do we bring the brand to life? And one of the ways that people want to see that happen is through racial and social justice issues. And even in 2021, a large percentage of Black Americans and people of color feel like brands don't understand them. And anyone looking to do a meaningful amount of business with millennials or Gen Zers really need to be kind of honing in on those areas. So those are some very salient points you shared. Thank you so much, Sandra. Hillary, I want to come to you with the next question. You are within a large organization, and an organization that a lot of people in this region hold in high regard. However, I think part of your role is to introduce change. Can you tell me about any resistance you may have experienced when attempting to implement DEI efforts within your organization? And how did you respond? How did you handle that? Because I believe that a lot of people may encounter some of those challenges, and want to know, how do you kind of broach these subjects within your company or organization or with the client? So can you tell us about any particular experiences you may have had in that area?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and of course, we have been, and I say we, Asha has been recently hired about a year ago in Q1 2020. We hired a system VP of diversity, so Deborah Grimes, who is my boss, and I report directly to her. So I think that does help to be able to have some validity amongst your employees as well as in the community. And in terms of resistance, there has been, some pushback in certain areas where people don't understand, well, why are we talking about this now? And we would prefer to stay silent. And I just have diversity fatigue. And so really helping them to understand that in order for us to be able to be an innovative system, we have to address that. And we do that by the data, by showing this is where we are now, but this is where we can be if we make certain changes. Or this is what options are available to us if we work through these different strategies. And so really helping people to educate people first, and helping them to really understand that this isn't just something that I made up or that, Warner made up or that the system made up, is that this is really what the numbers are saying. And so really putting that on, I guess, a granular level so people really understand what that means to them. That's been one of the ways that I have worked through those challenges, and also really having conversation with people, sitting down, old school, grassroots, tell me how you feel. And so when you're having those conversations, you start to hear, okay, maybe it is a diversity issue, but there are some things that they don't understand about diversity, even with people, African-American, Black people. Oh, well, Black History Month makes me feel othered. Okay, so why does Black History Month make you feel othered? And so asking those questions and being able to safely walk them through how they feel has been, I would say, one of the things that's really helped me in working through these challenges.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Hillary. I want to bring Anna Maria into the discussion. Anna Maria, in January of last year, myself and some partners, we acquired WBOK 1230 AM radio station, 70-year-old Black news and talk station here in New Orleans. So I'm a fellow media compadre of yours. In the last year, we've seen these large kind of multinational and these major media conglomerates rush to create multicultural content and multicultural programming. iHeart Media created the Black Information Network. And then locally, entities like the Times-Picayune and folks like that are creating multicultural branded segments of their products. As a publisher and a media professional, I want to get your thoughts on it. How have they added? How has communities of color responded to it? And what is the future for these kind of large conglomerates creating these niche pockets and publications, and just your thoughts on it in general?
So many thoughts. So yes, I remember a few years ago, the Times-Picayune created a section called Nolamundo, which was a Spanish section within their newspaper. I believe it was Wednesdays and Saturdays, that included about 2 pages of Spanish news content. They had a really good writer. I believe she's still around. Her name is Maria Clark. She was getting into the community, trying to look for relevant stories. However, the idea of the audience segmentation, I don't think it worked correctly because the Latinos who were already part of the audience of the newspaper were bilingual. They were getting their news in English mainly, and perhaps those native Spanish speakers who will have benefited from those news in Spanish weren't targeted, they weren't marketed to, they didn't even know that the newspaper was doing this. So that didn't really last that long. I believe where they failed was that they didn't really partner, or I believe they did have a partnership, but that partnership wasn't really done in a very meaningful way. I believe it was just something on the surface, looking for more advertising revenue from the Hispanic companies that are around town that want to target the American, the mainstream consumers. And also something they didn't understand was different kind of budgets. So, you know, they're used to dealing with bigger companies that have much larger advertising budgets, and they were thinking they will go into the Hispanic owned businesses and that they will find the same commitment to them advertising within the newspaper. So I think they have to do a better job of these partnerships, understand the community much better, and really get involved with the community. It's not just about, we're going to give you this news here, but what are you doing to support that community that you're trying to include? What kind of efforts beyond the print or the advertising itself are you doing? How are you helping? How are you representing? So I don't know if that answers the question. It's hard for minority media to compete with large conglomerates like that. And I believe what we need to try to do is make people understand that even though we might not have those huge, large audience numbers, when we communicate correctly and the communication or the advertisement is culturally relevant, it brings a bigger impact, even if your audience is smaller. You're representing correctly, you're connecting correctly. So.
Great. Thank you for that, Anna Maria. And I emphatically agree with you. While
I
we
should
have
add really quick, I'm so sorry. Very proud to say that Finola is writing the content for Fox News. Right now, they have a tab on the website that's all in Spanish. And we're trying to really involve the community so that, you know, they understand they have a news source that is in Spanish and they can go to their website and find this information. And it was something really quick that happened because of the work we were doing during COVID, providing information. And, you know, it's something that we're trying out. We have been doing this for a few months. And I believe they have the right attitude and the right mindset. So hopefully, you know, this will last and become bigger. Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you. That was a very important point. Thank you so much for that, Anna Maria. And I emphatically agree with everything you said. Obviously, from my seat as a media owner at WBOK, we are constantly making the point to advertisers that obviously in radio we request our gross rating points and our ratings numbers, and we are making the case that there is a disproportionate value when you are coming to someone in an authentic manner through a media source that's particular to that audience. One, not only does it show you support the importance of culturally relevant content just by supporting it, but also it also just comes across as so much so thoughtful. So you and I are certainly aligned there. Thank you for sharing that. What I want to do is I want to open up and see if anyone on the panel has any case studies or experiences, whether you all were a part of them personally or saw them in action, where a brand attempted to do something that included diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it was wildly successful, or it missed the mark, or any stories or anecdotes anyone on the panel would like to share. Anna Maria, you're on mute.
Yes. So I don't know if I've been but something that I thought was successful was a Nike ad, right? When the racial tension, the Black Lives Matters movement was taking place during this pandemic. They did an ad that just said, this time, just don't do it. Like don't ignore it, speak up. I think that was very well thought of. So that was one. Look it up. It's on Google. You can find it. There is so many bad examples out there. And I found one that I wanted to point out, because sometimes also when we're talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity, we can totally, like, instead of embracing it, we can definitely like miss the mark and just do it totally wrong. And this is something that I found. I think it was like in one of the Carolinas. And I love the message. Everyone smiles in the same language. That is a great message. And then you have the picture that totally misses the mark. Not only do they not include anybody that looks different in their ad, but I mean, if you really look at the copy, then you're talking about whitening, and you have only Caucasian women who are dressed in not only like traditional clothing, but costumes. So I don't know if this was released around Halloween. That would have make it, I guess, in some way better. Not really. Better is not even a choice here. But I mean, it's so important to, and I think this is the perfect example of, like, if you don't work with people who are from different backgrounds and that have different viewpoints, and you don't include them in what you're doing, then you end up with something that completely misses the mark. Not only misses the mark, but can be offensive to different people. So yes, maybe they have a diverse staff, maybe they have many people working along their side that are from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different age groups. I mean, they look like they're twins to me. But are you including them? Are you listening to what they have to say? Are you showing this ad before it goes out? Are you even like having a conversation with them? So that's something that I think it's problematic in the way that many companies we're diverse, we want to attract different people, so invite everyone to the party, but then you party, how are you get treated when you're in the party? Are you comfortable there? Offering drinks, talking to you, are you one corner? Are you being provided with resources and opportunities to thrive? Not everybody needs to move up the ladder. Not everybody needs to but in what you're doing at that moment, are you giving everything that you need to succeed, to do your job, to feel good in the company you work for? So there are some, you have the huge miss, and that's pretty recent.
Thank you so much, Anna Maria. I'll make one comment, then I'm gonna go to an audience question. What I'll share is that I have used the example that's on the screen regarding the Pepsi and Kendall Jenner ad. I've used it for the last 3 or 4 years since it came out as one of the worst fails in advertising that I've seen in my adult life as a marketer and advertiser. And every time I cite this example, to me, it calls out the lack of diversity that must have been in the team. From the concepting process, the creative brief process, the production process, the media buy, this concept went through so many layers of people to make it into a Super Bowl ad. And the millions of dollars that went into it. And no one along the way was either in the room or felt empowered enough while being in the room to say, this is an awful idea. And this speaks to why not only should there be on screen or on camera diversity in the ads, there needs to be diversity in the room with the people that are building the ads and making the decisions on the client side, on the agency side, and et cetera, which is we, and as members of AMA and the industry, we need to be kind of building that diversity from inside out within our own organizations, and then it will become more apparent on screen. And that is a perfect tee up to a question that was submitted from an audience member. And I'll direct this to any member of the panel. How do you approach minorities for marketing materials, testimonials, videos, etc., without making them feel like a token? So I want to, as the moderator, I want to give that to the panel first, and then I'll also be happy to chime in on it from my agency seat. Does anyone
Love to tackle that, Cleveland.
all yours?
And I, wanted to piggyback on your comments as well. I think that it's a challenge. I'm actually going to say it's a problem in the marketing and advertising industry that if you look at the age makeup, the racial makeup of many agencies, it's very myopic. And we're finding that not just in the case of racial and differences in women versus men's sort of representation in marketing and advertising, but we just were presenting to a client yesterday some data on the over 65 market. And it was an interesting juxtaposition of what do agency folks believe about Americans over the age of 65, and what do 65 plus Americans believe about themselves? And there were huge disparities. And so I think that that's a data-driven finding that needs to be applied to this conversation that we're having. So it does start with making sure that you have the right people in the room. But as a researcher and a consumer insights person, I would argue that you need to be thinking about your brand, how it's perceived, what's an authentic message and position to take, and then testing those, with employees, with consumers before launching to make sure that it is resonating and it's authentic to the brand. And so there's a component of who's in the room ideating, but then also there's a component of take it into research and formally test it with the people that you're trying to target, because they will tell you, hopefully if you've done it right, they will tell you that you've completely missed the mark.
Thank you for that, Sandra. And what I will add to this question, as an agency, we produce a lot of assets for our clients. If the brand is operating with kind of diversity and inclusion as a guiding principle, when a person of color is approached to be featured in a company asset or a company collateral, they won't feel tokenized because it happens all the time. It is normal. So I think the goal for the brand or the entity is normalizing diversity. And that's the surest way to ensure that the person does not feel tokenized when they approach. If there has been 20 assets put out before this one, and in February the Black person gets asked to be in it, and then that's a possibility they're going to feel tokenized. But if as an organization and as a culture, there's a steady flow of stories and people of color, of different sexual orientations, different sexes, ages, genders, etc., in the brand's assets, then you mitigate the likelihood that someone will feel tokenized. So I think it's more of a cultural and a brand thing that happens over a long period of time versus how to mitigate that in a particular instance. And that's the take that I would add to it. So we have this dynamic panel here, and we have about 9 minutes left. I do just want to allow the panelists to open their mics and say anything you all may want to say to the viewing audience we have before we adjourn in the next 8 minutes. Ladies?
Go ahead.
I don't necessarily have a closing, Cleveland, but I did want to go back to this whole, I know Sandra made, that was great in terms of the data from why DEI is important to consumerism. I just also wanted to uplift that DEI is important. It's basically the best business case in terms of where the job market is going. I think it was PricewaterhouseCoopers who produced a report saying that something like almost 80%, definitely over 70% of millennials they will choose their job based on certain values and mission alignment to theirs. So in terms of just how you plan on even sustaining and growing as a business and the talent pool that you want to attract, DEI is gonna continue to be extremely important. And I'm a believer that the public can detect a fraud. So you can put all interracial people in your commercials as you want to, from a internal cultural thing, standpoint, people will know. And if you risk high turnover, that's more costly for your company, excuse me. So I just kind of wanted to uplift the point that this country is changing. You know, as my previous boss, Steve Stout, would say, the country is tanning. And we have to acknowledge that. And to, all of Sandra's point, really use data, but as well as, I would say, qualitative methods of really just being willing and being courageous enough to get proximate to these issues and certain communities to really service them correctly. So I just kind of wanted to, again, just to, in closing, just say that there's a real business case for why DEI work matters. It isn't just the moral imperative or because it feels good. There truly is money at stake. Like, your business is truly at stake if you don't take this seriously.
Thank you, Kelly. Anna Maria?
Just to add to what, like, multicultural is mainstream. So that people have to understand that multicultural is not anymore like, oh, minorities here and there. No, mainstream is multicultural right now. And something I wanted to say, and it's an example, there is, the smaller companies will have the Latino worker or the African-American worker. I think people have to understand that just because they share a specific culture or they're not the representatives of that culture with the company. So it goes kind of like a little bit to what the person was asking about how to put people in advertising. Same thing goes to your workforce. Just because you have the one Hispanic or the one Black person, they're not your spokesperson for that community. Not everybody who's Hispanic and works for a company can be comfortable speaking, being a public speaker. They don't have abilities, skills, knowledge. Just because they're Latino doesn't mean they can, represent your company in different ways. That's where you have to, if you need to implement some policies and things like that, or do a media campaign, you need to go with experts in the field that understand the culture, or, the researchers, the people who actually do the trainings for the diversity, inclusion, and equity. And just to say that the goal is equity, diversity and inclusion is great, but if there is no equity, then that work was amiss.
And I would say, first, thank you all for this opportunity. And to Kelly and Anna Maria's point, in terms of the way forward, I really think that it is important to look at, certainly what the data says in terms of hiring and making sure that, numbers really do reflect what employees look like. But also, I guess, from our side and to Anna Maria talking about, well, you don't want to ask the one Black employee or the one Hispanic employee. So from what we've done, we've been able to put together a talent acquisition diversity council, which essentially brings people from different backgrounds to talk about, okay, are we putting things in place to have more inclusive language in our job descriptions? Are we making sure that our interview questions are diverse and that they really speak to just the candidate as a whole and not a woman or a man? And so doing those things, and then of course, hiring a diversity outreach specialist, so that's their job to make sure that we're not just asking the Asian employee to go, okay, well, why don't you go to New Orleans East and go see what you can find? Like putting creative strategies behind your money so that way you can get a really strong return. So I'm just certainly, I know that we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of work to do, but we are as a company and as an organization very committed to making sure that we do those things. So thank you all again for having me.
Hillary. Sandra.
And I do want to echo what Hillary just said. Ochsner really has made a huge commitment to diversity and inclusion, and we will see a lot of that in this community in the next 10 years. In terms of closing thoughts, I guess I want to add to what Kelly said and talked about the fact that there is a business case for diversity and inclusion, starting with just demographic makeup. Gen Z is the last cohort that will be a majority white, and it's only by 1 or 2%. So that's it. Like, so every other generation coming behind is we cannot ignore diversity of experiences, people of color. We cannot, and so we will not be speaking to our audience if we don't address that. The other thing I'll say from a business case perspective is that there is data, hard quantitative data, to show that there are higher profits among companies that have women in their boards and diverse workforces. So there is a hard business case that can be put in front of senior leadership in your C-suite to say, this is why this is important. We will be more profitable. And then I guess the last thing from an anecdotal standpoint, the last 2 people that joined my company they came to me and they said, the reason why I wanted to be a part of this organization is because it's woman-owned and women-led. We have plenty of amazing men who are great contributors, but that was their number one reason for why they wanted to join our team. So, all of those things, I guess, combined really speak to the business case. And that is what's going to drive interest from a corporate standpoint, if we can make the business case. It would be nice to say everybody's going to jump on board because it's the right thing to do, and it is. But we have to speak the language of the C-suite, and that is business results.
Great. Thank you. And for my closing remark, what I'll share is that as relates to this topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, the word that I always use is intentionality. There are hundreds of years of behaviors and cultures that need to be unlearned and changed. And in society, and particularly in our industry, in marketing and advertising, it's going to take a lot of courage and intentionality by people in decision-making seats to integrate diversity into our industry. And that you have to be thoughtful about that. And we found ways to do that within our company. We're fortunate to have a very diverse company representing a spectrum of people. But that took a lot of effort and intentionality around our hiring practices, around how we find candidates, how we begin bringing people into our company as interns through HBCUs and things like that. So as you all are in your companies, your agencies, groups or associations, be intentional and thinking about how do we bring diversity to the forefront of our organization, and then really be committed to that over time. I want to thank the panel. I want to thank AMA for allowing me to host this panel and lead a discussion with so many brilliant, dynamic women. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Haley and Anna. And I will turn it over to Anna for closing.
Thank you so much, Cleveland. Thank you, Hillary, Anna Maria, Kelly, Sandra. That was such a wonderful conversation. I'm so encouraged that we had so many participants show up today to hear this conversation, because, just by you being here and bringing this information back to your organizations, I feel like we're doing our small part here to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion into businesses in the New Orleans area. So thank you all so much. We're gonna end it here. I do want to share one last thing on behalf of AMA. We do have 2 upcoming events this month. If you'd like to join us, we do a monthly marketers meetup, like Mariska mentioned, mid-month every month. This is just, kind of a networking event where you can just talk about questions that you have, literally no agenda, just show up and join the conversation. And then we also will have a guest speaker at the end of the month, Justin Archer, will talk to us about unlocking creativity. So we're excited about those 2 events. We'd love to have you join us. And go ahead, and if you want to follow us on social media, you can find out more about all of these events. And I don't know if we're going to send a recording of this to everyone who showed up today. I'll make sure to include contact information for our speakers if you have any further questions. And that's it. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.